Hey guys, it's Rashcroft with Political Simulators Unite. Just wanted to say thank you guys for tuning into this latest video. Wanted to highlight a game called Cold War II. It's a browser game, not on Steam, nor can you find it anywhere else. I find it to be incredibly detailed. A lot of work has gone into this, and I just wanted to do a playthrough briefly of this particular scenario. So, the scenario I'm playing is I'm currently in the United States and it runs from 49 to 76. So 1949 to 1976. Now, in this particular game, you can actually play the USSR or China, but just for, I think, as a good introduction and probably as a good way to kind of familiarize yourself with the game, I would suggest playing as the United States. So before I move things forward and go to the next month here, what I am going to do is just kind of just like I did in some of the previous videos, just highlight some of the things that I think are important for players to know. So let's click on the United States. And as you can see here, it is October of 1949. Currently, the president, Harry Truman, he has nerves of steel. So what this shows is, as the tooltip shows up, this leader is particularly resistant to pressure, and you'll understand what that means in a moment. This leader is a hawk, and he's also at ease in a showdown and is looking for confrontation. No news at the moment, but some of the traits here that the United States has: Operation Paperclip, which is gives Americans a boost into research and development, and I'll kind of show you guys what I'm talking about there. The Galen Organization, bonus to subversion actions in Eastern Europe and the Balkans, and of course the Truman Doctrine, and that gives a bonus to economic aid. And Voice of America grants a bonus in creating oppositions. So there is no news because we haven't moved the game forward at all. Excuse me. And I just clicked on the dollar sign, which gives us our budget. So we can see the monthly budget here, our expenses. With currently we've got 35 million being spent. Well, 35. I'm assuming it's probably more like billion, but for whatever reason, for our purposes, this is just the way the game's modeled. So you get 35. Whatever amount going to troops, 10 to bases, 5 to research and development, and 10 is being spent on the Marshall Plan, which leaves us with a remaining amount of 50. We can look at our armed forces, and now this is not a reflection of like troops in reserve or anything. This shows you where your troops are currently deployed and the amounts that they are deployed in. You've got your bases here, one in the Philippines, one in the United Kingdom. We go to our R&D. We've got the A bomb already, which historical. As we all know, it's what ended World War II. And we are currently researching the H bomb. We're spending 5 on that at the moment, and that gives us the current progress is at 25%. And I can raise that if I like. Well, actually, I just lowered it. I can raise that. It'll increase the progress. Each turn in this game is 1 month. Or I can also, before I get ahead of myself, you got the intercontinental ballistic missiles. We can begin researching that if we choose to. I'm not going to at the moment. So every turn within this game is a month, and essentially your term ends, or the turn ends, I should say, when you run out of money. And each action that's taken requires money. So let's go ahead and see what we have here. You've got the different prestige score. We've got the United States prestige score here. We have Soviet Union and then the Communist China score here. This is our money, and you also have the DEFCON kind of meter here. And as this goes down to 1, this can trigger a crisis or a showdown, and you guys will see what that looks like fairly soon. We can also look at the different maps. So you can see here, blue represents pro-USA, red being obviously pro-USSR, so on and so forth. Now, given that decolonization has not happened in many of these countries, some are colonies, as you can see, most of Africa, as well as well, those are still colonies. Well, self-governing, whatever you want to call them. Anyways, that is the political map, if you will. Here we have the map that's not showing anything. Let's go to the next one. Same thing here. Hang on. Okay, yeah. I'll have to check in and see what that's all about. But what we have here is kind of our military map. This shows where all the different military forces where they're deployed around the world. Now, I typically don't refer to those maps. I can see them as having some utility, but primarily, oh, here we go. Okay, hotspots. So what this does is this shows us where the civil wars are. Currently, the Soviet Union, as we click on that, there's Ukrainian partisans fighting against the Soviet Union. Stalinism is at 5. And again, these characteristics, just like in the United States, impact the different they impact the game in different ways, and everything has its own effect. So you can see how that goes on that. Now, let's go back to the main map. Okay, so here we go. So what I'm going to do is, my first thing that I'm going to do, so when you click on a country, and every country on this map is clickable and pops up a screen like this. So what you've got here is obviously the name of the country. You get the points, so the prestige points that are allocated to it, and you have which country's sphere of influence it's in, or which superpower sphere of influence it's in. Currently, this is in the United States sphere of influence, and any change, as you can see here, of prestige points are doubled in your sphere of influence. So essentially, given that this is in my sphere of influence, this is not 50, it's 100. So if the Soviet Union was able to sign a military agreement with these guys, which would require regime change to do so, this would be a negative 100 on my part if the Soviets were able to do that, which again is very unlikely. Okay, so country status, we've got what type of government you have, the stability level, and the type of economy, and then the wealth level of the country. There's traits, and there are a few countries have certain ones. There's terrain. Then relations with the USA currently are kind. Relations with the USSR are bad. Economic treaties with us. Defense agreements with us. Defense agreements are probably the most important thing, just because this is the determining factor in terms of locking down your influence within that country. It kind of brings it to it's not a sphere of influence in this sense that you are expected to have control over it, but signing a defense agreement with a country is what it's more important than an economic treaty. Let me put it to you that way. So you got the armed forces in the country. Currently, there are 1 out of 30 total possible for Western Germany here, and we have 10 USA troops. So what I'm going to do is we're going to cut some of the fat here, and I'm going to recall 5 of the troops. So you get the withdrawing troops, our children are coming home. It doesn't affect our budget on this turn, but it will next turn. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here and then go right back into it. And you can see the exclamation point there indicating that an action has taken place. Now, here's just to kind of go through these different screens and what they, not screens, but these different menu options here and what they can do for you as the player. I kind of want to describe that. So economic aid. So for this particular factor, what this does is this is essentially you're choosing the amount of aid that you're giving to this particular country. Now, what this does, it serves 2 purposes. One, it can increase the stability of the country, and that increases the likelihood of that doing so increases as the amount of money that you give them goes up. I think I'm making it probably a little more complicated than it is. I think you guys get it. You give them more money, you're more likely to get a stability increase on this. Stability is very important because you can have oppositions, rebellions within the country, which we'll get into that in a moment. In addition to that, not only does economic aid impact the stability of the country, it also impacts the relations with the country. Military aid, what this does is, and I'll do this to demonstrate, this is direct funding to that country's military. I decided to give them 5, and the military aid has reinforced the armed forces of the country by 5. So as you can see, they've got a +5 on their military. Budget restraint, that went down. Or I should restraint. That's not what it says. This game was developed by a French gentleman, and so I would say a good 99% of the translation is spot on. There are a few things here and there that are just minor hiccups, no big deal. But this game is really a community effort. It was translated by the community, and a really solid, good, positive community group around this game. So if you guys are looking to if you're unfamiliar with the game and you want to learn how to play and think this is something that would be worthwhile, the community will welcome you with open arms. And matter of fact, I'll put their Discord. I'll put the link to this game on the description of this video. In addition, I'll put the link to their Discord as well. Really good guys. Okay, we've got 45 left in the budget. So we have the before, and then we have the after, no impact on stability, but yet we have armed forces at 6. Now, I'm just going to kind of get out of there to clear things up, go take us back to the main part here. What I can do in addition is send over military advisors, and that costs us 5 per month, and they will drill and advise this country's armed forces. So if you have some folks in a conflict, again, you send over your military advisors, so their armed forces become more effective. And that also is tied into stability. So the country's level of stability, if it's high, their armed forces are more effective, and if they have military advisors from you, it increases their effectiveness all that much more. Okay. Sorry, guys. I don't mean to belabor everything. I just tend to get a little too verbose at times. So, on the diplomatic options, you can build a military base that costs 25. As you can see, it grants bonuses to fighting and actions taking place in this territory. And a base will, of course, give you a prestige bonus. You can threaten the country. So, what this does is it'll deteriorate your relations and possibly Finlandize it. And this kind of harkens back to an old DOS game. This term, I mean, it's a well-known political term. So, but it reminds me of balance of power, which there would be a situation in which Finland was kind of known as a country in which the Soviet it was not overtly aligned with either the NATO or Warsaw Pact, and just there was no moving the country. It was not going to move. So once a country gets into the Finlandization mode, if you will, you can no longer sign a military or defense agreement with it, which means it's kind of in a no man's land, kind of non-aligned situation. But you can threaten it, and what this will do, and I'll demonstrate. Actually, no, I'm not going to demonstrate because I don't want to do that to Western Germany. So, aligning, this is an interesting thing. So, what you do here, it will force the country to align their relations with you. And we can do this, although it's not really necessary, but I'll demonstrate it. So it costs us 5. So what happens is the country's government has aligned itself toward your positions with such haste and severity that your diplomats are surprised. Okay, so what happened here? We've got a bonus now, given the increase in relations. We've got a 100% prestige. We've got 100 points of prestige, and our relations are now good. The stability is average, and their relationships with the Soviets, which were once bad, are now in the toilet. So you've got that. Let's go and we can do an embargo. As you can see, it will sharply deteriorate your relations with this country and hamper economic or military aid actions in this country. And opposition, this can create an opposition. I didn't discuss the ideological competitions, but this kind of uh, is in relation to the subversion element. So, what the developer of the game has done is he's identified kind of two, for Western Germany in particular, he's identified two ideologies, if you will, that find support within the country. And so, one being free trade unionism, and this trait generates a disadvantage to the Soviets when it comes to organizing protest marches. And also Christian democracy, and the USA has a bonus to its alignment actions. So you have that. So that's going to also have an impact on the decisions that you need to be making. So we can. So let's go back to subversion. So creating an opposition. This will create an opposition that you control in this country, and that enables you to start like an armed rebellion, or in some cases, it'll actually allow you to organize destabilizing protests, which will impact the stability of the country. You can actually do a coup as well, although unless stability is relatively low, is my understanding, is the main contributing factor to the success of a coup. Unless that's low, actually what will happen is if you have a country that has it's very strong stability, or I believe it's exceptional, is the highest level. What will happen is you hit a coup and it actually has negative impacts towards your attempted goals there, which is to change the government. So, also for Western European countries, they also have the stay behind option. Now, what this is only for the U.S. player. This allows, well, let's just do it. I'll show you. So, stay behind. So, what this does is you are funding a group of anti communist patriots. They've been gathered in a highly compartmentalized secret network. They will form the vanguard of a secret army that will become active in case of communist invasion or takeover. They will receive the best commando training in sabotage and communications to guarantee maximum protection of its members. Even the national government should not be aware of the existence of the network. So you're basically, you've got your stay behind guys. In the event that the Soviet Union invades, these guys get active and they fight against that invasion, or they fight any potential communist rebels in the country. And then, of course, we got the military action. You can send more troops. We took 5 out. Um, and we can take 5 more. I would suggest not taking the additional 5, because then what you're doing at that point is you would leave Germany with no U.S. military presence, which would it's going to impact your relations with them. So don't do that unless you absolutely have to. And I'm just going to go through here and click on some of the major countries that are going to be flashpoints here. Oh, by the way, so we saw what we did with the alignment action. That gave us the 100 here. The Soviets are now negative 100. So I just wanted to show how that impacted things. Going to the United Kingdom, you can see their situation. They have strong stability, market economy, wealthy. They have free trade unionism. We've got all the agreements baked in with these guys already. Of course, that's not surprising. We have a base here, don't need to do anything with that. Okay, so we're down to 35 on the budget. Now, this is 1949. Communist China, Mao just took over China. And you have Taiwan. The nationalists are now in Taiwan, or the Republic of China, whichever you like. So, a couple things we need to be mindful of here. At this point in time, there is a communist revolution against the Filipino government. And so here's an example of some guerrillas in action. So the Philippines, the current situation is our relations with them are average, as are their relations with USSR. We have defense agreements. We have a military base. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe the Philippines were independent at this point, but look, we all know where the power lies. The United States was not going to just allow the Filipinos to do their own thing, even if they were independent on paper. I know that sounds terrible, but look, this is political reality, not some kind of fantasy land. Okay, so to demonstrate the guerrillas, this is what we got. So we got the hooks. This is the guerrilla group in the Philippines. Currently, they have one, an armed force of one. Their potential is five. They hate our guts, and they love the Soviet Union. So they have traits as well. The rural guerrilla, this allows for them to have supporters among rural populations, which supply and inform the rebels. Fighting them will require displacing populations and extensive counterinsurgency operations. Fanaticism, that's another trait. These fighters are fanatical, and getting rid of this guerrilla will be extremely difficult. Coalitions with other rebel groups or negotiations with the government are completely unthinkable things for this group. Negotiations. This movement has initiated talks with the government. If the talks succeed, they will lay down their weapons and take part in regular political life. Okay, so let's go back into the Philippines. So I want this to be wiped out as soon as possible. As you can see here, armed forces of two. The guerrillas have one. I'm going to provide military aid funding to the Philippines. That's given them an increase of three. It's also increased our prestige by 35 points, increased our relations. So that's cool. And I could, again, guys, if you saw the screen that I just had up, I could make additional decisions from that screen. I just prefer to exit out and then go back in. Okay, so where we are here, and this is kind of a cool thing, I can actually fund the guerrilla, although obviously it'd be a counter to my own interest in this particular case. I can, and these are the different funding levels, I can also infiltrate it, attempt to infiltrate it, which then allows me to have some more influence over it. Um, so one of the cool things as well, given that there is a military base here, I can use napalm on them, although that does cost 5, and in addition, it also gives me a negative 10 on prestige every time it's used. One thing that you did not see in the screen for Western Germany is the ability to hire mercenaries. I don't feel the need to do so in this case. I think 5 to 1 is a good deal. We don't have an economic treaty with them, so we should do that. And negotiations are stalling. So what that tells me is what I've done here is my relations with them are not high enough. And as you can see, as my relations increase, my prestige increases as well. And it also makes it more likely um, only one only one economic aid can be granted per turn. I think that's a relatively new development. Okay, so um, what I can do at this point is attempt to. Okay, yeah, we're going to go for it again on the economic treaties. We did it, we got it, and so our prestige went up 35 as a result. Okay, and we're down to 15 on the budget. Okay, so I would also focus on South Korea at this point. You can see their situation. I'm going to give them 5 in economic aid. It increases our relations. No change on stability, although this 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 will eventually increase over time. And I'm also going to give them military aid. That had no effect. That's a shame. Down to 5. And I'm going to go ahead and give no effect. So apparently I was throwing my money away on that one. Okay, so now my money's gone. I cannot do anything else at this point, and I'm going to go ahead and move to the next month. So here we are, November 1949. At the beginning of every turn, you're going to see this screen that's going to be updating. It's the world status and enemy activities. Enemy activities. In Indonesia, the Soviets created an armed movement and attempted organization of opposition. So, yeah, essentially these two things led to this, if that makes sense. And it's not necessarily, going up to down in terms of chronological order. Okay, and then Romania, they were given 10 in military aid by the Soviets, and they were told to get in line with the Soviets on their diplomatic positions. Vietnam, Soviets are already playing over there with the guerrillas funding them. And then we have elsewhere in the world. So Indochina, France reinforces its contingent because currently Indochina is still a French colony at this point. Somalia becomes an Italian mandate, so on and so forth. Look, this game is has a lot of depth, and frankly, to get through it, I kind of have to just go ahead sometimes. You just want to make sure you're catching all the big stuff here. Um, the situation on the ground in okay, well, Philippines rupture of talks with the guerrillas, so the Hucks are going to be coming at us. Um, and Indonesia, they overthrew the government, they captured ground, and blah blah blah. Vietnam, guerrilla. Okay, and then there's some stuff going on in Colombia. It's a lot to keep track of. Um, but basically, my suggestion is at this point for this game, you just gotta have to hit the big countries, set your priorities. It's all about prioritization. I think that's the right way to say that. Prioritization. There we go. Um, and you only have so many resources to throw around, so you got to do your best. What I'm going to do here, because I wasn't too happy with the impact of the military aid, so I'm going to go ahead and bump up the economic aid to 10 to South Korea. Now that what I'm trying to do here is guarantee that my relations will go up, because as the more money I put forward to this, the more likely it is that's going to happen. And then I'm also going to go for defense agreements. Okay, so that's set up. And I'm going to go for economic treaties. Now that's set up. Now what I've done there is, you can zoom in here. What I've done here is cement South Korea in my um, uh, sphere of influence, for lack of a better word. Now, that's not exactly correct in terms of how the game uses the term sphere of influence, but that's just kind of what I'm doing. You got the different exclamation points, and this is all tied back into what's going on in the world status and enemy activities. So that's another thing as well. If you see a country on here that you've been following and you're concerned about, you can see if something has changed on the ground by the exclamation point. Um, and that's kind of a nice guide to just, instead of, reading through everything, if you don't feel like it, look, you'd be sitting there reading all night. But it's there too if you want to do it. So that's the cool thing about that. All right, we've got 35, and I'm going to go ahead and finish through this. Now, look, Indochina, I do not want the Soviets taking over. We have the Viet Cong here, or the Viet Minh, excuse me. They are a sizable force, 8 out of possible 10, and they've got all these awesome traits for them. As you can see, they're listed as Maoist, Marxist, and Maoist. Hmm. Oh well. Let's go in there. Armed forces. Let's go ahead and give France. We can see France. They have 31 of their troops in there. Let's fund the domestic Vietnamese forces. That only gave us an additional one. Let's give them 10 million. Well, I'm just saying 10 million in economic aid. What that did increased our relations. And we're gonna hire some mercenaries here. And let's see, where were our relations with them? They're currently good. Now here's the thing that you have to keep in mind. Yes, I could probably go in and do a defense agreement right now, which means I'm going to have a plus 25 on the prestige. Um, but you also, if there's a change in government, you're going to lose that. So you have to be mindful of that. I'm going to leave that where it is at the moment. It's not totally flared up. Let's check in and see what's going on in the Philippines. Okay, so no changes. We still got corruption. There you go. Um, you can see what that does there. So, in terms of how it impacts the country. And I'm not going to mess with that any further. Now, here's one of the things that I like to do. China will always invade Tibet. I'm going to give Tibet high military or some military aid here to max their guys out. And I like to use this kind of as when China does choose to invade, if I'm able to prop up the Tibetan military forces, it keeps China tied down for quite some time. I'm not going to go and bother with a defense agreement or even an economic treaty because eventually they are going to be conquered, so I'm not going to mess with it too much. But, you know, just one of the things I like to do. There's a million different ways you guys can approach this game, different strategies, different what if situations. And that's part of the fascinating thing about this game. It's really like a Cold War sandbox. Um, so let's go ahead and finish this turn. We saw what happened in Romania. Now, given that the French are involved in the war in Indochina, and you can see here what's going on with France. They have republic, average stability, wealthy market economy, and of course we have the agreements already signed with them. The opposition is controlled by the USSR, so that means Soviets can kind of wield some influence here. What I'm going to do is because they're moving their troops from France to Indochina, I'm going to make sure that France has solid funding on the military front to make sure that they can meet the obligations that they have. And there's going to be events coming up, choices to be made. Do we want to support the French? And you'll be giving them like five per turn in terms of money to help them support their fight in Indochina. So let me go ahead and let's see if I can move things forward. One of the things that you do want to do is make sure that some countries um, that should be in your corner, that you grab them, because otherwise the Soviets may jump on them before you. So I went ahead and moved the turn forward. We're now in December of 1949. Uh, so we got in South Korea. The Soviets are playing around there because they have signed up economic and military agreements with North Korea. China signed up military agreements with the Soviets, and the Soviets are pouring money into the Viet Minh there in Vietnam, and then some of the elsewhere in the world situations. You can see a coup in Syria, South Korea, political opposition organizes itself, guerrilla reinforces itself, so on and so forth. Okay, so no historical events as of yet, but again, I think I've served the purpose here for this particular video and showing you guys some of the mechanics of how the game works. This game again is very in depth, and I will put the the link to the game on the description here of the video. In addition to that, also their Discord channel. And again, this game is totally free. The only thing that, if you guys want to, you can support the gentleman who created this game, his Patreon page, and you'll get access to all the different scenarios that he has out there. But by all means, check the game out. Really cool game. It's probably my favorite browser game of all time. Definitely the most in-depth political simulation I've ever seen, as just in terms of a browser game. Anyways, thanks guys for watching, and look forward to talking to you guys in the future.